In any two-dimensional game, anything that has a high level of movement is typically referred to as a sprite. Now, sprites typically have two different kinds of movements that go on. The first kind of movement is internal, and usually it's looping and it's local. And this kind of movement is done frame by frame with a sprite sheet or a series of frames. Now, also say that our character was to walk, and when our character walks, he moves forward. The forward movement is actually what we call procedural, or it's done with programming and code. So there's a compilation of frames, and they're inside of a bounding box, and this determines certain kinds of motion on the character's part. But also, we have programmatic motion, which makes characters move up, down, or across in relationship to the entire composition. We're going to explore how to give our characters, or our sprites, that first level of motion, that local motion, with frame-by-frame sequences that are drawn in Adobe Flash. So we're going to take a look at that. So we're going to open up Adobe Flash. You should probably be using Flash CS6, or you can also use Flash CC. We can use Flash CS5 for this exercise. However, if you use CS5, we might have to find a different way to generate the sprite sheets. But right now we're going to use Flash CS6. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new ActionScript 3 file, like so. So the first thing that we need to do to create our sprite is we have to give him a bounding box. Right now, this bounding box is entirely too large. Sprites normally aren't this size. Usually I would say a good size for a sprite would be, 128 pixels by 128 pixels, or 256 pixels by 256 pixels, somewhere in that range. So what we are going to do is I'm going to right click on this area here. This is called the stage in Flash, and I'm going to change the document properties. And I'm going to change this to 256 pixels by 256 pixels. And you can leave the background color white. And we will tinker with the frame rate later, but that's something that we can look at later. So, okay, so now we have this square, and inside of this square, this is going to be the bounding box for our sprite. So you'll notice here we have a timeline, and this timeline is where we're going to place additional frames, and these frames are going to be the particular states of our animated sprite. So the different ways, the different frames of the animation that are going to be going on. So the workflow for this that I recommend doing, there's a couple of different tools over here to draw with on your right. However, the workflow that I recommend is to start with this first frame here, and we're going to I like to use the brush tool, but there's also different kinds of tools like the pencil tool, right? So we can check this out and see what it does, see how it creates a certain kind of a line there. The brush tool, I particularly like it because it's very forgiving, but it also kind of gives you more of that stroke quality to it. It widens and thickens the stroke based on the loop, and it gives it that interesting, it gives it a much better look, right? But there's also, you can erase. So there's an eraser down here, the eraser tool. So if you make mistakes, you can go back in here and you can erase it, right? So there's different things that we can do, and different tools we can do. So I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I definitely encourage you to go in here and explore all the different tools that you can use. So we're actually going to walk you through doing a frame-by-frame animation. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to take all of this stuff that's on the stage here. I can drag a box around it with this black arrow here, and I can select all of this stuff and I can just delete it to clear it off. So once I make drawings and strokes and things on my canvas here, or rather it's a stage, once I make things and drawings onto my stage here, I can go back through and I can select them like objects and move them and delete them. So I'm going to draw my first frame. So maybe I want to draw my first frame of my walk cycle. So I'm going to set up a little character here, and I'm going to have him one leg forward, and then I'm going to have the leg come down here like this. And what this is this is just one part of a walk cycle, right? So there's usually, I think, about 8 frames in a walk cycle, and this is just one of the frames. And you can see how easily I drew that on the piece of paper. We left him centered, right? And now what I'm going to do next, since you see this black dot now in our timeline, this means that he's taking up one frame of our animation. So this is just one state of our animation. So the next frame is actually going to be, I'm going to right click in that next frame here, in that next slot, and I'm going to insert a blank keyframe. And what that really does is it gives me another piece of paper, and I get to draw on that, and it's kind of like a flip book by the time I'm done. So there's a couple of things. First of all, I don't know what that last frame looked like, so that could really present a problem for me. One thing I can go do is I can go down to this little icon down here. It's really tiny down here at the bottom, but it's called onion skin. And if I select the onion skin, what that'll do is that'll allow me to, you'll see that we get these brackets here that allow me to see the last frame that I drew, right? So I can draw right on top of that for my next frame. And then what I can do now is I can do the next frame of the walk cycle. So maybe his foot's a little bit more extended. So see, I can go back and forth between the two, and he's starting to walk for us. So that's a good thing. And then I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to right click in here again. I'm going to insert another blank keyframe, and you'll see that my onion skin that I had turned on down here allows me to see multiple frames at once. So I can go ahead and I can draw in the same area, or I can draw in different areas based on kind of what so I can draw multiple, I can draw I can draw in the area based on what was in the last frame. So that helps me out. And if I click here and I drag back and forth this red, we call this the playhead. If I drag back and forth, I can go ahead and I can see the playhead. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to draw a couple more frames in to fill out our animation using this same process. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to insert another blank keyframe. And I'm going to go ahead and draw this. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about a couple of more things that are going to be necessary for you to do your single character sprites. So I went ahead and I added a couple more frames to my walk cycle here. So you can see as I scrub through it, you can see I have an animated character. It gives the illusion of movement. Probably not as good as maybe Miles would have done, but yeah, we'll keep it for now. It's kind of fun. You don't have to do a walk cycle for your animated character sprite. You can pretty much make your animated character sprite do anything that you'd like. Just experiment and have fun with it. Try to think of something that has a cycle to it or something that is cyclical. Then that way it might be a little bit more fun and interesting to do it that way. But you see as I scrub through here, it's something that I can run over and over again. So this is sort of the local motion of the character that we're going to see, maybe throughout an entire side-scrolling game, as the character might walk like this and navigate obstacles, but it would be as we control the character, this cycle would run and run and run to give the idea of the character actually walking, right, as they move forwards and backwards and left and right and things of the sort. So I've gone through here and I've just added some more keyframes. So I have 8 frames here, and this is really a character taking one step. So I went in here and I individually drew, and it took a little bit of time to do it. I went in here individually and I drew individual frames of the character in each position. So this is what's called a frame-by-frame animation. So we're not using tweening or anything like that at the moment, but what we are doing is we're drawing a single frame-by-frame animation. And now that I've done that, I can actually go down here to check myself, and I can actually press the play button. And you'll see if I press the play button, he kind of scurries real quick and then he stops. So in order to check this, if it's a cycle, I can go to loop. For example, this button down here with the this curved arrow down here. What this does is this gives me a range of frames that I want to loop when I play it back. So now, if I press the play button, you'll see I can actually watch it as a loop. And this is part of the creative process, right? So you run it, you play it, you make sure it looks fine. I might say, hey, this guy looks a little weird, a little jerky up here. So this is part of the way that you may refine a frame-by-frame animation. Something else to look at too is that this is really fast. I mean, they must be offering him free food or something. I mean, he's really hurrying quite a bit. And that has to do with the frame rate. So right now we're playing all 8 of these frames, we're playing them at this frame rate down here, 24 frames per second. Well, it's fairly easy for us to change that for the purposes of this exercise. Later on, we'll probably be changing the frame rate inside of CreateJS so that we'll get a certain number of frames, and we'll change the frame rate inside of CreateJS when we're making games. But for the time being, let's go ahead and down here, and I'm going to enter a new frame rate as 5 instead of the usual default frame rate of 24. So you could have adjusted this at the beginning with your document properties, but nonetheless, now that I have that changed, I'm going to play it back, and yeah, it looks a little bit more natural, right? So for the purposes of this exercise, you can go ahead and you can go ahead and change the frame rate to 5. Maybe I want to make it 7, right? He might work a little bit faster if I change it to 7. So there you go. I think that looks looks kind of fun, kind of natural. And really, I think the thing that's fun is really these different, you have to, this is really characteristic of a frame-by-frame animation sometimes, is that you have to redraw it every time, but you can't draw it perfectly. So you'll notice on the top of his head that there's these, it's kind of like these artifacts of me not having drawn it perfectly every time, which I think speaks to kind of this rough hand-drawn look that we sometimes see when we see animation. So that's something that we have a little bit of fun with as well. So now that this is done, or at least I'm satisfied with it, we can go ahead and we can turn it into an animated GIF. The way we do that is fairly straightforward. Now that we've got this timeline done, I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to save this by going to, I could Command S to save it, or I could go to File, Save As, and I'm going to save this as an FLA file. So I'm going to call this maybe Sprite1. And now that I have it there, I can, now that I have it saved out as an FLA file, I can now take this timeline and I can export this as a movie. And previously I exported a ping sequence, but when you're exporting your movie, make sure you export your movie as an animated GIF file. And what that'll do, I've already saved out a couple, so I've been practicing. I'm going to save this out as Mr. Walker, or whatever you want to call it, right? And this is basically going to be, and this is going to ask you, okay, what's the resolution? What's this, all of this? So then the default settings should work fairly well, and you press OK, and we should have an animated GIF file. So let's go ahead and check out the animated GIF file and see what we got. Now I can open up Windows Explorer, in this case, or Finder if you're on a Mac. So you can open up Finder now, and you can find your animated GIF in the position or in the same file location as you saved it in out of Adobe Flash. So if I go ahead, I can definitely open this up, and it's probably going to open it with, let's see here. Can I get away with opening it? Well, it's probably going to open it in Internet Explorer because it defaults to that. But anyhow, this is something you can use to check it. And if I open it up, it's an image that opens up in a web browser, and it's got an animated cycle to it, and it goes automatically in a cycle. So that's pretty fun. So now that I have this, how can I complete the assignment? So say I do this and I have 3 of them, right? And I do have 3 of them technically, but say I did 2 more that were unique, and I did the same process 3 times. Well, now I can select this animated GIF file, and I can go to my blog. In this case, I'm using Tumblr. I can go ahead and especially in Tumblr, I can create a new photo post, and it's just as easy as me taking this and clicking and dragging this GIF onto my Tumblr page. And how's that? That's pretty fun. And pretty much it shows my walking sprite here. And you can even say, this is my first walk cycle. And also something that you may want to try, and this isn't necessarily absolutely essential, but try tagging your posts, especially if you're on Tumblr, as EMDA, and also tag it as hash EMDA203, and see if we can get a hashtag set up so that we can pull these and showcase them. So there's a couple different ways. If you need to upload a photo another way, you can click here, and you'll be prompted with a file dialog box to go ahead and search out your image. So if you don't want to click and drag in, then you can go ahead and do it that way. And then when I'm finished and I have all 3 of my characters in this one post, I can just go ahead and post it. And then now that we have your blog URLs, we can go ahead and we can look at them and grade you on them. So if you have any questions on this, just shoot me a note or shoot Miles or David a note and let us know. Thanks. So now that we've created our animated sprite, the one thing that we'll need to do is we're going to need to be able to export a sprite sheet out of Adobe Flash so that we can get it into our web browser and work with it in CreateJS. So what a sprite sheet is it takes every single one of these frames here from our sequence and then turns it into a single image. And then CreateJS is smart enough that it can look at each one of these images and project it onto the screen at the right time to give it the illusion that it's walking. So if you don't understand it right now, it's okay. Just hang with me and I'll show you what the sprite sheet looks like, and it should all come together very nicely. So this is where we're starting at. We did the last exercise. Is I have a file and it has a single timeline. So I have a Flash file that I created. Mine's called Sprite1. And I have these 8 frames that I created in the timeline. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Shift key. I'm going to select every single one of these frames in my cycle from the timeline. So they should all show up as blue. And now that I've Shift selected them, I've selected them all at the same time. Now I can right click on that set of frames and I can actually copy the frames. So I've copied the frames, but where am I going to paste them to? What I need to do now is I need to paste them into a symbol. So let me go ahead and I'm going to right click here on my library panel. If for some reason you don't have a library panel, you can go down here from Window and you can find the library panel right there. Easy enough, right? So I can right click here and I can make a new symbol, and my symbol is going to be a movie clip, and I am going to name it something very distinct. All lowercase, no spaces, just name it something. I'm going to call mine Walker. So the shorter, the sweeter, the better. Again, no uppercase, no spaces, no kind of funny business like that. Let's keep it simple. Let's press OK. Now what we have here is we have a timeline that's empty, and this timeline links back to our symbol. So we're able to get back out to our main timeline by clicking up here on scene, right? And we can still see those frames. They're copied into memory now, but we can go back and copy them again if we do this out of sequence. And then I can get back to this symbol here and the frames inside of the symbol by double clicking it. So now that I'm inside of this symbol, which should, by default, when you create it, it should just open the symbol up. I can go here and I can right click again and I can paste those frames into the symbol. So now we can see the center point of the symbol. So this is going to be the center of gravity for our sprite sheet. I can take that and now I can export a sprite sheet from this, because now it's inside of what we call a symbol in Flash. So now we can take this symbol and I can right click on it from my library and I can click this option to generate a sprite sheet. So now that I've generated a sprite sheet here, it brings up this, well, now that I've told it to generate a sprite sheet, it brings up this dialog. And you can get an idea of what a sprite sheet looks like. It lets you look at every single frame all at once. And maybe sometimes if you've broken a video game or you've seen somebody hack or glitch a video game, sometimes artists like to take these and play with them and do different things with them. And they show all the different possible states of a character. You can even preview what it's going to look like. Our guy's walking fast, but that's okay. Don't worry. We're going to fix the frame rate now in CreateJS. This is the important part, though. We want this. Second important part, too, is to make sure that our data format is set to easel.js. And what that is it's basically going to be the logic or the code that this writes automatically to tell it what frame lives where in the sprite sheet, which is critically important to what we need to do. The next thing we want to do is we want to browse to a folder where we can put these items. We are going to move them, but let's pick a main folder where both of these items can go now. You're going to get a JS file and a ping file. So I'm going to take this folder here. I've set up a folder called rjones project as an images directory and a JS directory. Why don't I just save it right here temporarily in this home directory, and I'm going to call this Walker. I'm just going to say name my ping Walker, and I'm probably going to go back and rename some of the other files too. So let me go ahead and save that. Press save, and now I'm going to export. Press the export button. All right, now let's go ahead and we're gonna take a break, and then when we come back, we're going to look at the sprite sheet and the code that goes along with the sprite sheet. Okay, so we've gotten 2 files out of Adobe Flash after we exported the sprite sheet. We have this here, it's called walker.js, and this is all of the logic that it takes to work with the sprite sheet. And this right here is a raw image. Well, it's not a raw image, but it's a ping image. And this right here, if we preview it, it shows us our sprite sheet, which is what we looked at in Flash. So it's all the states of our walking man all on one image, which is really helpful. So we're going to do a couple of different things to get this prepared so that we can take it into CreateJS and work with it. So first thing we're going to do is I have a folder, and this is just good practice to start from the beginning when you're building your project. Set up a project, have index.html at the base, like we talked about in our code snippets, index.html at the base, and then I set up a folder for my images, and I set up a folder for JS, which is going to be our JavaScript, right? So we notice that this is a JS file, this is a JavaScript file, and we notice that this is a ping file, which is an image file. So right now I'm going to take this JS file and I'm going to actually scoot it right here into my JS folder. The more organized we stay, the better. And now I'm going to take this walker.ping file and I'm actually going to move that into my images folder because this just helps me stay more organized. You can definitely put these files in different locations and it's not going to completely disrupt the way your game works, but this is just good, clean, organized practice from the beginning. So right now I do need to make some changes to the JS file that comes out of right out of Flash. It's just not ready for us yet and what we need to do. I do have an extra JS file in here for this CreateJS library, so don't worry about that just yet. What we're going to concentrate on here is we're going to make some alterations to this JS file that came out of Flash. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open it with Notepad++ because I'm on Windows. But you're going to open your version on a Mac, you're going to open yours with Text Wrangler. So you're going to have a similar experience to me. There really shouldn't be any difference between our 2 experiences here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say I want to edit this with Notepad++. So the file opens up in Notepad++. For you, it's going to open up in Text Wrangler. There are 3 changes that we need to make to this file to get it to work properly. The first thing we need to do is change the reference to where the image is located. And I'll tell you exactly what you have to do there. And then there's 2 small changes we need to make here. And we also need to make a change right here so that we reference the CreateJS library. It's just a technical, logistical glitch issue that we just need to address. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to change the reference to the image. This image needs to be referenced from our index.html file, which if that's a little confusing for you, don't worry. We'll get you caught up on that and we'll explain in a little bit more detail later. But for the time being, the thing you need to know is you need to type ./images/walkerping. And this will make the correct reference to that image now. So actually it's not referencing directly from I made a mistake. This isn't referencing directly from the index.html file. It's actually referencing from the current location of this JavaScript file. Again, if that's confusing, don't worry. It's not necessary that you know it, but if you maintain this organization structure, this trick here will work properly for you. There's 2 more things we need to do. We need to type in all lowercase, no spaces, the word CreateJS, and then we need to put a dot or a period in front of it. Before this here, where it says new sprite sheet, we need to insert CreateJS dot in front of that. And then we need to do that again down here where we type CreateJS dot bitmap animation. And you're going to need to do that with all of these files that come out of here. They're fairly simple fixes, but they're really crucial for getting this to all work properly. So if I go ahead and I save this, then this is what we'll bring into our index file so that it works properly. So just to give you a quick idea of where this code and where these files eventually end up, I've opened up one of the code samples or one of the code modules from Moodle, and we're going to look down here, and this is where the reference to the JS file goes. It's okay. You'll be prompted to do this in the example. And basically, and we've got lots of notes in here to guide you. What this is going to do now is this is going to reference your .js file. That's your sprite. So this is how we actually give it the code it needs to run the sprite. And also the JS file, as you remember, contains a reference to the actual image file where the sprite frames are going to be kept. So this is this line here is really where we reference our particular file that we had created. And then down here, we just create what we call a new instantiation, or we create a new version of our sprite, Walker. And this name here came out of this walker.js file. So this is referenced actually in this file. And then what happens is we say, hey, I want to create a variable called myWalker. And I want that to be a version of, or I want that to be a copy of what this guy is. So right now I've got this, and this is a copy of Walker, and now I can do different things with it now that I've referenced it properly here and I've made a new copy of it. I can say, okay, I want to move it to 320 pixels and 180 pixels. And also I need to add it to the stage, which we can talk about a little bit later. I need to add you to the stage. And then right here, I set the frame rate to 7, so it looks proper. And then after I've completed all of this, basically I'm going to open it up in Chrome, and look, we've got our animated sprite here inside of our web browser. So now it's very easy for us to add some kind of procedural animation to this, right? So you've got a procedural animation module, so it would be really easy for you to apply the code that you did in that module to this to make him walk across the screen. Now I'm not going to give away all of the clues here, but that's where you're going to head, and that's how you're going to make this guy actually look like he's really walking instead of just walking in place here. So good luck, and if you have any questions, just let us know.